Hey, Candidate here. Today we're going to be speculating about the upcoming DLC, The Ring City, taking a look at the trailers and screenshots we've been shown, and seeing what we can deduce. Let's start with where the DLC is taking place. Well, we start in what's called the Dreg Heap, a jumble of different areas and locations similar to the landscape outside the Kiln of the First Flame. Later on we seem to move into the Ring City itself, and the buildings in the Ring City are covered with the Sword of Avowal, the ceremonial sword of Londo he used to marry Henri, and the Hollow Lord questline. So the Ring City is, or perhaps used to be, in Londor. However, there is a bit of a wrinkle to this. If you look at this picture, you can see what looks to be a windmill in the back, and it talks about being in a swamp. That's pretty similar to Harvest Valley, an area in Dark Souls 2. As someone on Reddit pointed out, the enemy also looks quite similar to the human effigies you used in Dark Souls 2. A lot of the previewed weapons, while not being exactly the same, are extremely similar to weapons from Dark Souls 2. There's a giant version of a fan that was used by the sorceresses in Earthen Peak, a lightning bow, like the Bow of Want, a lightsaber like the Artery Straightsword, and a big pair of gates used like the Armor and Reeve shields. Now you can say that this is just a product of Dreg Heap and all these different lands and eras coming together, but instead I think what's going on is that Londor is located where Drangleic used to be, and there is evidence for this in the main game. The most obvious are the descriptions of the Hollow Gem. Stone plentiful in Londor, land of hollows. Hollow weapons are said to peer into the essence of its wielder, whose luck boosts attack, which is a reference to the iconic line from the Emerald Herald.
Go on and see the king. He who made Drangleic what it once was. He who peered at the essence of the soul.
And the Mannequin Claws. Weapon of the Pale Shades, assassins of the Sable Church of Londor. So the entire order of assassins in Londor use these weapons. And it's not like mannequin is a generic term, these are very specifically the same ones used by a single group of enemies in Dark Souls 2. That the Pale Shades all wear masks is also reminiscent to the mannequins, who don't, but were supposed to. And since we're going to be visiting the Harvest Valley Earthen Peak area anyway, I think we're probably going to get this connection illuminated on. There's also the theology of Londor. The Sable Church is obsessed with three major ideas that seems to have origins in characters from Dark Souls 2, specifically Ardea, Vendrick, and Nashandra. There's the concept of a true king, lord, or monarch.
So thou mayst a true monarch become. May you be the truest lord of Londor yet.
A true monarch is much more than a ruler of men. A true monarch carries the weight of their souls.
I too sought fire once. With fire, they say, a true king can harness the curse.
Young Hollow, there are but two paths. Inherit the order of this world, or destroy it. Only a true monarch can make such a choice.
There's also the obsession with the Lord marrying.
Our lord, and knowest thou of a maid named Anri? She is hollow, and will join thee in wedlock. A fellow of mine guides her at this moment. When the time is ripe, thou mayst make thy salutations. For what lord taketh no spouse?
While you can argue that maybe Gwyn and the Ivory King were married, there's only one time a lord being married is made explicit, and that's with Vendrick marrying Nashandra. Finally, there's the idea of the Hollow being the true shape of man.
Ah, Lord of Hollows, it shall be who weareth the true face of mankind.
Which is referenced openly by Vendrick.
Drangleic will fall, the fire will fade, and the souls of old will re-emerge. With dark unshackled, a curse will be upon us, and men will take their true shape.
And rather more obliquely by Ardea.
Men are props in the stage of life, and no matter how tender, how exquisite, a lie will remain a lie.
Also, during the lead up to Dark Souls 2, Miyazaki mentioned that when he considered the difference in locale between Dark Souls 1 and the new game, he would say that if Dark Souls 1 takes place at the North Pole, then Dark Souls 2 takes place at the South Pole. And during the opening to Dark Souls 3, it mentions the Londor pilgrims going to Lothric are travelling north. Speaking of the pilgrims, one of the biggest story beats in the main game was when the eclipse was revealed, and we saw the pilgrim butterflies, seemingly transformed Londor pilgrims, taken to the skies. Since we're going to Londor, it's not a surprise more are showing up. You can see this one here is quite different from the ones in the main game, with wings that look a lot more like the moonlight butterflies. That's pretty interesting. If you've seen my Puzzle Man video, I speculated that the butterflies are turning into dragons, based on their dual wing structure being similar to that of the archdragons. One being similar to the moonlight butterfly is reinforcing that connection, as the butterfly was created by Seath, and Seath himself even has similar insectoid wings. We also have this large bat-like boss, which has the same sort of weird, fleshy, rooty, and fire-filled body as the pilgrim butterflies. If you get a good look at its face, it seems to be the same sort of demon as the bat-winged ones that take you to Anor Londo and away from Lothric. These guys have always been kind of a blank space in the lore, so it'll be nice to get a little bit more about them. I've always thought that the pilgrim butterflies look very visually similar to Aldia, and this boss reinforces that connection. It's a chaos demon, and the first sin that Aldia is a scholar of is presumably the creation of chaos by the Witch of Ioseho. She's even in Dark Souls 2 as the Lost Sinner. And since he seems to have an ideological connection to Londor, it's possible we'll get something about him. The butterflies can also be related to the angel that we see. Angels, like the butterflies, seem to be connected to the fire fading, and the world transforming back into the Age of Ancients, including undead transforming into dragons. You can see this in Osiris. He has feathered wings like an angel, as well as these statues of people transforming into primordial serpents that have little angel wings. It also fits with this sequence of a very dark wraith-looking knight that's using a shield that can spit fire. If you take a close look, you can see the shield is actually the head of a Lothric drake. I wouldn't be surprised if there's another version of this enemy which uses the large archdragon head shield you can see in this screenshot. There's also the Deep. There's obviously been a lot of speculation about it, and it looks like we're going to get something. You can see these enemies use a blue-tinted dark attack that's characteristic of the Deep, and the location they're in, Dregheap, ties into the Deep through human dregs. Now there's some things that don't show up in the trailer, but we can infer might show up, or at least we'll get some info about. The first is Lillian, one of the founders of the Sable Church. Since we meet her sisters, Yuria in the main game, and Frida in Ashes of Ariandel, it'd be a bit weird if we didn't go 3 for 3. So I think it's a good bet she'll show up in some manner. Gale's story from the first DLC will be resolved, and maybe that means we'll get something about the Sunless Realms. If you look at Gale's set, it's pretty similar to Hodrick's armor, and he also has the Sunset Shield, which is the shield used by the Knights of the Sunless Realms. We don't really get much info about it in the base game, other than it's got something to do with the Dark Moon Blades, Mirror, and it's home to a deity called the Nameless Moon, so any little tidbit is going to be useful. If we're going to take a harder look at the Sunless Knights, it could also touch on Hodrick and the Mound Makers. Definitely an aspect of the lore I don't think anyone has a complete handle on. We might also get something about Velka. She seems to be worshipped in Londor, as her miracles are part of the Londor Brielle Tome, and Yuria is dressed like a raven. Interestingly, Gale also seems to worship her. He prays to a statue in the Cathedral of the Deep, similar to the one in the Undead Settlement, and he refers to the statue as Mother of the Forlorn, the most obvious and common Forlorn being the Corvians, who in Dark Souls 1 were worshippers of Velka. Finally, let's talk about my favourite part of the trailer, and what may prove to be the most iconic and surreal moment in the series, this image of a woman holding a hatched egg. To me, the obvious place to go is Gertrude. Gertrude's a prominent part of the lore of Lothric. She is rumoured to be the daughter of the Queen, and was the creator of the angelic faith. With there being both angels and stuff from Lothric like this banner in the Ring City, she's definitely the most likely candidate, especially since Gertrude was blind, and you can see that this woman has black gunk coming out of her eyes. As for the egg, there's not a lot of direct evidence for what it could be, but I think if you look at what From has been inspired by, you can maybe figure something out. One possibility is an anime movie called Angel's Egg, which features a young girl that looks strikingly like the painter from Ashes of Ariandel, taking care of the titular angel's egg. So maybe an angel's hatched from it. Or, going back to the idea of angels being people turning into dragons, it was a dragon or some sort of mix of the two. Another possible source is the perennial Dark Souls influence, Berserk. There are two, let's call them plot points to avoid spoiling things, in Berserk called the Egg of the King and the Egg of the Perfect World, both of which also involve angels and white feathered wings. Everything seems to be tying back into Gertrude. However, the concept of the egg containing a new world could tie into Gale's storyline. He is looking for the Dark Soul to create a new painted world, and the interior of the egg is covered in black goo. So maybe this was where the Dark Soul was. These ideas can both be true, of course. The egg could have hatched a Dark Angel, not exactly an unprecedented idea for a boss in Dark Souls. It could also be a play on the idea of the Egg of the King. If you do the Hollow Lord questline and talk to Wilhelm, he'll say this.
You're Lady Uria's Lord of Hollows.
Which you can read as there being other Lords of Hollows created by the other founders of the church. So maybe Lillian is trying to use this egg to create another Lord of Hollows. Considering Miyazaki's interest in birth and newborns, if whatever has hatched from the egg is a boss, I wouldn't be surprised if it was visibly immature or childlike, similar to the Orphan of Kos. Or it could also just be a Vagrant, the enemy you'd get for dropping items or bloodstains in Dark Souls 1. The base, weak version of the Vagrant drops a single humanity, after all. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I'm definitely looking forward to the DLC. I'm still working on the Firekeeper videos and they should start coming out soon. Stay tuned.
And the unkindled will